Right now, an American developer can spend an hour coding with America's best AI and pay about $10 for it. The same hour, the same code on a Chinese model. Under 50 cents. One developer in San Diego told a reporter he honestly can't tell the two apart. So Americans are switching. Quietly and in growing numbers. And the model they're switching to cost $5.6 million to build. But that's not the strange part. The same week American companies leaned harder into Chinese AI, Beijing accused an American coding tool of hiding a backdoor. Sit with that for a second. Two governments both racing to wall off their own artificial intelligence, the chips, the models, the tools developers type into every day. And the whole time, their own companies quietly lean on the other side. This isn't a race. It's a standoff. Hey, Finn here, and you've just landed on Signal Tomorrow, the show that takes the biggest AI stories apart to show you what's really running underneath. New around here. Subscribe, it genuinely helps. The question I keep coming back to, how did China close a gap this wide this fast? First, the company. DeepSeek is a lab in Hangzhou that stunned the industry back in December 2024 with a model called V3. What set it apart was the design. V3 has 671 billion internal settings. Parameters, but for any single word, it fires up only 37 billion of them. Picture a giant firm where only the right specialists show up for each job. Far less computing power. The same answers. They didn't sell it though. They gave it away. The weights, the actual trained model, went online for anyone to download and run themselves. No license, no permission. Alibaba, Moonshot, Minimax all do the same. And once you host a model yourself, the price falls off a cliff. That's why Chinese open models run 60 to 90% cheaper than the best American ones. Price became the weapon. Rewind to the start of the year. When DeepSeek's R1 model landed in January 2025, people called it America's AI. Sputnik moment, a jolt of proof that the race was far tighter than anyone had admitted. But a wake-up call is one thing. What came next is what truly rattled Washington. These cheap Chinese models didn't just impress people. They started turning up inside American products, the apps and tools you open every day. There's a service called OpenRouter, think of it as a switchboard, routing a developer's request to whatever AI is cheapest and sharpest for the job. On that switchboard, American firms now send more than 30% of their traffic to Chinese models. Every single week since February 8th. At the peak, it touched 46%. A year before, the average sat near 11%. And today, DeepSeek is the most used provider on the entire platform. And honestly, these aren't hobbyists tinkering on a weekend. Airbnb builds on Chinese models. So does the company behind Cursor, the coding tool. A company called Lindy dropped Claude and moved to DeepSeek. Even Microsoft eyed DeepSeek for a cheaper tier of its Copilot. None of this breaks a single law. American firms can use these open models freely. But in Washington, that freedom was starting to look like a hole in national security. Washington moved. In April, the administration vowed to crack down on Chinese firms exploiting American AI. By early July, House Republicans opened a formal probe into U.S. companies leaning on Chinese models, naming DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax, and accusing them of coordinated campaigns to pull advanced capabilities out of American systems. But under all the politics sat one technical word. One word that explains the entire fight: distillation. Distillation works like this. You take an expensive, top-tier model and ask it millions of questions. Then you use those answers to train a cheaper model to copy it, stealing the skill without paying to build it. In February, Anthropic said DeepSeek, Minimax, and Moonshot did precisely that at industrial scale. The scale they described: around 24,000 fake accounts. More than 16 million conversations harvested. Not long after, Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google began quietly trading intelligence to catch it. This is where it turns into a two-way fight. On July 8th, China's National Vulnerability Database, a government body run by its tech ministry, put out a security alert on Anthropic's Claude Code. The charge: a hidden backdoor. In versions 2.191 through 196, they claimed the tool could send a user's region and identity to remote servers, quote, without the user's consent. But the real story is stranger than plain spyware. Researchers who tore the code apart found it checking one very specific thing: was your computer's clock set to Shanghai or Urumqi? Then it matched your setup against a list of Chinese tech names: Alibaba, Baidu, ByteDance, Moonshot. And to secretly flag an account, it didn't beam out any data. It swapped the apostrophe in the phrase "today's date is" for a lookalike character. A fingerprint hidden in plain sight. Right? What does Anthropic say? An engineer called it an experiment from March, built to block unauthorized resellers and, yes, to fight distillation. He added that they'd been meaning to pull it anyway. They merged the fix on July 1st, one day after the researchers' post went public. Too late, Alibaba banned Claude Code across the entire company and pushed its staff onto an in-house tool called Coder. The deepest layer of all is silicon. That same week, Reuters reported that DeepSeek has spent roughly a year designing its own AI chip. Not a training chip. An inference chip, the kind that actually serves answers to millions of users. The goal is blunt: stop depending on NVIDIA. And at the same time, the lab that once turned away every outside dollar is raising its first funding round, worth around $7 billion. Designing a chip and building one are two different universes. U.S. export controls lock Chinese designers out of the world's most advanced factories. So DeepSeek would have to fall back on domestic fabs, chip plants like China's chipmaker SMIC. One analyst put it flatly: DeepSeek has almost no chance of selling that chip outside China unless it somehow gets its hands on leading-edge manufacturing. For now, that means one market: home. And the chip war has flipped in a way almost nobody saw coming. Late last year, the US finally let NVIDIA's powerful H200 into China, with a volume cap and a 25% tariff attached. Beijing's response: it told its own companies not to buy. Customs stopped the shipments at the border. By the middle of May, the number of approved H200s actually sold inside China was 0. Brookings didn't hedge, the ballgame's over, and America lost the China chip market. Look, here's our read. China is behind and China is ahead are both true. They're just about different things. On raw capability, US benchmarks still put China's frontier models 6 to 9 months behind America's. That gap is real. But 6 to 9 months is roughly one product cycle. And on the things that compound: cost, adoption, independence, China isn't slowly catching up anymore. It's rewriting the rules. Step back and the pattern is impossible to miss. Two governments, each building walls around its own AI stack: the chips, the models, the developer tools beneath them. Washington investigates its own companies for using Chinese models. Beijing is now weighing whether to restrict exports of its very best models, like Alibaba's QN, as leverage of its own. Each side wants an AI it fully controls, and each side's companies quietly lean on the other to get real work done. How did China catch up this fast? It didn't outspend anyone. It got radically efficient, handed its models away for free, and turned rock-bottom prices into real leverage, all while the chip fight it was supposed to lose quietly swung its way. The gap is real. But it's narrow, and it's closing from both ends at once. We'll be watching closely to see what each side does next. If this made the whole picture click, a like helps the channel more than you'd think. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.